I know.
And we all got blue.
I know, I tried to wear a little bit of blue too. I got the memo.
This is supposed to be blue,
Yeah.
but it's more,
It's so periwinkle, it seems like.
yeah, periwinkle.
Yeah. So, what are you reading, Mimi?
These are some of the things I wrote down. Kathy wanted me to, she said, see if you can remember the very first thing about your life. And one of the first things I remembered is having a tonsillectomy about 4 to 5 years of age. I remember in surgery the doctor asking me if I wanted to smell something nice. I nodded yes, and of course I was put out with the help of ether. His name was Dr. Stoikov. He always kept me close to his family and wife and daughter who was about my age. The daughter died in early childhood. At her funeral, doctor wanted me to be in the picture they took of the open coffin at the cemetery.
Oh.
And that coffin, he had a huge monument built for her. But through the years, I don't know if that just deteriorated or if the vandals knocked it down. But it's still out there, and it's by my grandparents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my grandparents are all out there.
Huh.
All my relatives, actually, other than Bob and Dedo, and a couple of my aunts are at Calumet Park.
But what cemetery is that?
Ridgelawn Cemetery. There's my grandmother, my grandfather, 3 uncles, and 1 aunt. Yeah, 3 uncles and 1 aunt. And the others are buried at the Calumet Park Cemetery. But I don't know what else.
Well, Papa, what's your first memory?
Hmm?
What's your first memory?
My first memory, 1922. I was 5 years old.
That's when I was born. Huh?
My father, we moved to 25th and Madison, and we lived on 22nd Avenue, so we were going to walk. We didn't have a car in them days. That was the olden days. And we were walking, and we took a short through a vacant territory that's now it's all full of houses. But we were walking there to the house, and that's the first memory I remember. And then I started a kindergarten. Sam and I, well, we never knew an English word. It was just Croatian we talked.
At home?
At home.
Wow.
And then Sam and I started school together. Sam was a year and a half older than me. But I guess, I imagine that now, that we went to school same time, or really close age. So then we were, after, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, I was
They didn't
ahead
speak
of
a word
Sam.
of English.
Wow.
I was ahead of Sam, and then I skipped a grade, And I always remember when we were about 10 years old, I and Olga Kupsa, she was a kind of lame girl, we were the 2 smartest kids in the class. We were always, and what the heck else?
So, do you remember a lot of Croatian now? Or can you speak any Croatian now, Papa?
Što ti pitaš mene?
Kind of broken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little Croatian and English together.
Well, he doesn't speak it as well as he did.
Did your parents learn a lot of English, or did they mostly speak Croatian?
Mom just spoke Croatian.
She
But
spoke
Pa,
very little English.
Pa, he was pretty shrewd. He made checks out and all that stuff. He knew everything. But Mom, we had property. Mom knew everything, anybody owed money when they were due and all that. She was sharp. And then, when we were kids, Gary Post, we're getting a Gary Post, it costs 3 cents.
3 cents?
And Ma said, now if you kids don't start reading those papers, I'm gonna quit that. I'm not gonna be wasting my 3 cents on this. So then, there's 4 of us, so we would go to a little candy store half a block from us on 25th and Madison. And the 4 of us, she'd give us 1 penny. My older sister, she had the penny. So you got four candies for a penny.
4 for a penny?
And poor old guy thinking later, poor old guy, here there's 4 kids arguing, I want that, you know. Poor guy standing for a big profit he's making for 4 pennies. And then we started there on 25th and Madison. Sam and I really worked there. Before I went to school in the morning, I got up in the morning, we butchered hogs and we had a kettle to heat the water and firewood to heat the water. So I would start the fire before I went to school in the morning. And then Pa would come there, you know, he'd be butchering that. And then I would go to school. Then lunch hour, I was maybe 10 or 12 years old. And school was right about, pretty 4 or 5 blocks away from us on 25th and Harrison. That became Roosevelt School. We were Roosevelt, the whites were, and then the blacks were Roosevelt hanging.
You were Roosevelt?
Yeah, Roosevelt. It was all white school first.
Oh, okay.
And then the blacks, they started putting 3 or 4 in every one of our classes.
Oh, okay.
I still get a letter from one of the black guys there, Albert McReynolds.
From what grade did you meet him?
From
Like first grade?
and up to high school, 8th grade. Then when we finished 8th grade, go to high school, the blacks went to Roosevelt Annex then.
Oh, the annex.
And we went to Frable, the whites. And then we had to walk over a mile from 22nd and Broadway, well, first from 25th and Madison, then 22nd and Broadway. Then we had to walk up to 15th Avenue and up to Madison Street. It was about close to a mile to walk there every morning. Now these are bus stops house to house.
Yeah, every house. Like maybe they would stop here and then 2 houses down they'd pick up another kid. The kids can't walk anymore.
Then, you know the kids that lived in the other side, like 35th Avenue on the other side of Broadway, they had to walk through all the school. All of that, that's over a mile there too.
Wow.
And then let's see. So then lunch hour, my father would be butchering hogs and he'd have a bunch of them, you know, hung up, cleaned and needed to be gutted. I would gut them at about 10 or 12 years old, about 10 hogs. I'd gut them and you know, I'd eat in that 1 hour's time. I'd come home and eat and then come out there and gut those pigs and then wash them off, you know. And then when you wash that stuff, some of that stuff gets on you. One day the teacher comes there, hey, you better go home and change your clothes.
Because you're stinky?
I shouldn't be telling you that.
Oh no, Papa, I like those.
You do like. And then, well, we were then, in them days, Sam and I were 10, 11 years old, we were driving those Model Ts.
What was that like?
Well, yes, you had to get on have something behind you so you could look over the steering wheel.
You have to sit on books?
Whatever.
You'd have to sit on like a book or something?
The books weren't available. They probably had boxes or
Boxes,
stuff.
crates.
Crates.
And what the heck else I can
Mimi, did Baba and Dedo speak Croatian at home, or?
No, they spoke, I didn't learn to speak Macedonian with Grammy and Grampy. Well, see, Grammy had a rough time of it when they first got married because all his relatives, his family was Macedonian, and Grammy had just come here a year and a half from Europe, and she just spoke Croatian. And that's not that close, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it had to be rough for her, but after they got married and had us, they insisted they wanted to learn the English language. So they would listen to the radio, we got newspapers, they would read the newspapers, and however they could, they would speak to us in English. So both Uncle Jim and I did speak English.
growing up. No.
But I learned Macedonian from my grandfather, thankfully, who was living with us.
Okay.
And he spoke no English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
say. You know,
It
his
worked
cuss
out.
words was.
my grandfather,
What's
he,
his cuss words?
his favorite cuss word that he thought was a cuss word was Sacramento, California. It sounded like a cuss word to him.
And what was his name?
His name was Risto, R-I-S-T-O.
And Risto Christoph? Well, at least when he was
It
here.
wasn't Christoph. This
That-
was weird. It was Apostolov, because for some reason I have yet to learn this story from my cousin Kiki Petrov, who lives in Florida. She knows the whole story behind the fact that he's an Apostolov as opposed to a Christoph. But the way the Macedonians worked it, when you came here, you took, not coming here, even in Europe, you took your father's first name and made that into your last name. Like, my grandfather's name was Risto, so Grampy took George Christoph.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
in English, that Risto would be Chris,
Chris, okay.
so he took George Christoph.
Christoph.
Actually, Uncle Jim, if they went by that, he should have been Jim Georgia.
Oh, okay.
See how
Yeah.
that works?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was Macedonian. Not anymore. They don't do that anymore.
They keep just one.
They keep one name. Because the Apostolov name, there are a lot of Apostolovs. They were sort of related to us. But my grandmother, who Dedo married, she was an Apostolov. But somehow I bet
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I would have to.
You
I
gotta talk
get
to her.
that straight. Yeah. It sounded so confusing when she told it to me. She's supposed to come for Rachel or
Ashley's wedding.
Ashley's wedding
Oh, because she lives in
because she
Florida.
lives in Florida, and that's one thing I'm going to ask her to explain it to
The
me.
number one thing.
The one thing I want to ask her, because she knows. She did a lot. She did like you're doing. She did with her mother. She did a lot of this, and I have yet to hear what that was all about, because I think I could find out a lot of Grampy's background by listening to what she had told my
Right.
cousin, about the family. So,
Watch your toes, everybody.
here's old, what's her name?
Old Crip.
So your grandpa lived with you for a long time?
He lived with us all the time, yeah.
All the time?
He lived with us. And then when we moved to our house in Glen Park, he stayed in the room at the back of the store.
Okay.
And he did all the cooking, because Grammy and, Bob and Dedo worked in the store all the
So
time.
they were busy.
Yeah,
So you'd have some authentic Macedonian food all the time.
all the time.
What was your favorite?
The only thing is I don't know that I had a favorite really, because we ate a lot of stews. So,
Yeah.
We
Uh-huh.
all the stews I liked. I liked the okra stew. My brother hated it. He says okra had a snot in it. And we'd have pork stew and all kinds of stews. That was basically what he cooked. But on Saturday nights, that's the night my dad Grampy would get in the kitchen and he'd make hamburgers for everybody.
That was his big thing.
Ah, they were good hamburgers. Yeah, he'd pay the clerks off and then he'd have all this meal for them.
Aw. Well, that was
So,
nice. Saturday
yeah,
night was
yeah.
family night then.
Saturday night was the night everybody got together in the back kitchens before we closed the store. Yeah.
So where was the store?
Downtown Gary, it's not there anymore. It was on 12th and Adams. They've torn down all those buildings. There's nothing in that area. It's kind of like a park.
Yeah.
Now they've raised all the, there were a lot of old buildings there. But Grampy's first store was on 1209 Adams. I remember that address. 1209 Adams. And then when his business started to improve, he moved across the street to 1200 Adams. And it was a much bigger store. The store that he was in originally was just about this big. Not much bigger than this.
Really?
Yeah.
So what'd you guys sell there? Just regular groceries and everything?
Groceries and meats. And we lived in the back. There were 4 rooms in the back.
Oh, wow.
No windows. Not a window in that place.
So it would be hot in the summer.
Ah. So you know what we would do? After we'd close the store, we'd go out to the beach, Miller Beach, take blankets, and sleep there at night.
Really?
And then come back in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So would you have like a tent or anything?
No,
You just take some
just
blankets.
There was no such thing as a tent. And we weren't the only ones. There are a lot of people out there because there was no air conditioning.
Right.
Fans were in.
Right. Fans are expensive probably.
Well,
And
I don't know that there were any fans yet.
going around.
And boy, you'd see a lot of people sleeping on the beach.
So what year do you think that was around? That you'd sleep out on the beach?
Ooh.
You were born 1922?
Yeah. So
So
if you were like,
We were still living in on 12th and Adams.
Yeah. But you were going to,
That had to
Grade
be in the early, very
30s.
early 30s.
wow. And so
Or
it was,
late 20s.
it was safe to sleep out there though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No
Did-
problems.
Wow.
Never a problem.
then the
Today's,
depression.
you would reconsider.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
You couldn't
nothing
sleep
like that,
out on the
nothing like
beach.
that. And
You
then
get
we,
murdered
you know,
on
we
the
bought our
beach.
new house. And we were so used to being at the old place. So every night after we'd close the store, we'd go to the new house and sit there. And sit, and the house was newly painted, all the varnishing, everything, a beautiful house.
Once you sit a while,
And-
you can listen better, huh?
Oh, I can hear.
We're sitting in there one night and Dad says, "What's wrong with us?" He says, "This house belongs to us. Why are we going back to the old house?" The next day we moved into the new
You
house.
finally did.
We finally got out of those
Habits.
4 little windowless rooms.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty nice.
About the railroad, your dad here you worked on.
My grandfather worked on the railroad for years and years and years. That's where he started out. Then after he quit, he stayed, worked for my dad.
Oh, really?
But he lived with us all the time.
Yeah.
He always
The
lived.
DPs, what the Macedonians, they worked on the railroad, then they slept in old railroad cars there.
That's dangerous too.
And they get,
That's all they had available to them.
and then when they get paid Saturday, they go to, go to town and get maybe gloves or whatever they needed and stuff like that. People from town would be throwing rocks at them,
Why?
Because they were hunkies.
Yeah.
hunkies.
We were foreigners. Eventually, the steel mills built some houses. In fact, that's where I was born, those houses on 2nd and Fillmore. They were all stucco, but they were built for the workers in the mill, so they
Okay.
had some place to stay.
Was it cheaper housing?
Yeah, very cheap housing. But it was houses as opposed to them sleeping in the
Rail cars.
rail
or
cars.
something.
Yeah.
How did Baba and Dedo meet?
She
Did
was
they meet here?
Here. She was living with her sister, And her sister was married to a Macedonian man, and they had dances like every weekend.
Uh-huh.
And they would go to the dances, and Grammy saw, or Baba saw Dido there, and he was always a good dancer.
Uh-huh.
And she says, if anybody in that crowd, she says, that's the guy I would marry. Well,
Well, that's who she married.
that's how it turned out, yeah.
And they got married happily ever after. 9 months later,
Oh,
Yeah,
she came.
there's
back.
Mimi.
there was me. And then about 6.5 years later, Uncle Jim, and I remember I was in the house, we were living on 36th in Connecticut, and I was reading the paper, the funnies or something, I was laying on the floor, and it was a small house too, not much bigger than this here, I think, combined.
Oh, wow.
And I knew that, there was going to be a baby,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm laying on the floor and reading that paper, and all of a sudden I hear a baby's cry, and I figure, well, that's the baby. I didn't even know what it was, so eventually the midwife came out and she told me I had a baby brother. And no big deal.
Kept going back
Kept
and
going
reading.
back, reading my funnies, that was more important.
Babies were born in the home, at home.
That was at home.
I remember when Monday was born, I was 10 years old. But then, all
His
the-
youngest sister.
The midwife, she told all the kids to go on out, get out, and then you could hear the moaning,
Oh,
and there was Monday.
Papa, do you know how your parents met
Well, in Europe.
in Europe?
They're neighbors, kind of, sort
Oh,
of.
okay.
But Ma had a tough
There were
life.
usually arranged marriages
Okay.
in most cases.
In Europe at
Yeah.
that time still?
So
And
Pa-
even here, for
Yeah.
a lot of years.
Pa, when he was working, he was just a young boy. He was working with oxen. They're pulling logs out of the mountains there, and he was working there. And then they got married, and then he come to the steel mills and got a job there. And the way it was in them days, when you got married, your wife was pregnant, you came to this country. And then you next year you go back, a year or two back, you go back there, you see that kid the first time, you leave your wife pregnant again. Dido did that for about 4 times, wasn't that so?
Yeah. Another thing, you remember more about my great-grandfather. He was quite well-to-do, Dido's
Grandfather.
grandfather. And he was very well-to-do. He was considered like aristocracy because he had so much
Money.
so much money.
At that time.
And he owned hotels, so to speak,
Uh-huh.
at that time. They were more like boarding houses, I imagine,
In Macedonia?
in Macedonia. And he owned like a lumber.
No, all the fish came out of the lake there.
They're
He
right
got
on the
a
lake.
cut off of that, and all the, what the heck was that, the lumber?
All the fish that were ever
Yeah.
caught,
He got-
he got a cut out of it.
Wow.
And all the lumber out of the trees.
From the mountains, he would get a cut out of that.
He could kind of be like a
He was
godfather.
an a real entrepreneur. That's
Oh,
where
yeah.
Dido got all his get up and
From
go.
his grandfather.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, the Turks came in and everything was taken away from them.
Oh,
That's when Baba ended up in the mountains with Cheech Boris to get away from the Turkish people because everybody else had left.
So all of her, like everybody in her town had left?
All the relatives and people that could get away got
Did
away. And
early.
she went up into the mountains and she had the baby and she just had one loaf of bread. And she was hiding in the mountains with
Your uncle?
my baby uncle.
So her younger brother.
Yeah.
Wow.
And eventually the Turks left and they were able to come back
What about her parents then? Had they already left or?
The grandfather, I don't know anything about the grandmother. The grandmother must have passed away very early because I don't even have pictures of her. I have
The
pictures
father's
of
mom?
no, of her,
Father's grandma?
Dedo's mom. We have pictures.
Okay.
Uh, what do you call Dedo?
Dedo.
Dedo. All right, his mom. We have pictures,
Okay.
but not of his grandmother.
Okay.
Grandfather, we have a picture, but not of a grandmother. I have all those pictures. That's kind of surprising, but again, they had the money to have pictures, because like Grandpa's family, there are no pictures from the relatives.
From Europe?
But we
From
have,
Europe.
remember our family pictures when we were all kids.
But that's here,
Yeah,
But not back in Europe?
not in Europe, nothing from Europe. You don't have any pictures from like your grandparents, nothing. Grammy had pictures of her sisters. I think I still have one.
Mhm.
And there was one other, no, I have more pictures of another sister that was living here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't until she came here?
But then when my father came to this country, I guess he's about 18 years old, and then he went to work in the steel mills. And they worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then every second Sunday they got day off. And then all their just the men were coming first, and there was hardly any women. Then everybody, every time a woman come in, everybody, I want her, I want her, you know. Like.
Yeah.
And so then, then Pa started working in the steel mills, and then he in them days, all the hunkies, what you call it, or Europeans, they did just like the blacks got the dirty jobs. Then
Wow.
Pa and Mr. Tichak, that was his wife was first cousin to Pa.
Okay.
And the two of them were working in the mills, and they were the first two millwrights, foreigners in that mill.
Oh, wow.
And then, what's called that one, Pa telling the superintendent wanted, he's going to go to another, I don't know, Pennsylvania or someplace. And he wanted T-Check and Pa to go there, but Pa didn't like it. Well, T-Check was ready, but Pa didn't like the guy. Pa said no, then they didn't go. And then that guy, superintendent, he didn't have no good bosses, you know, Pa and what's called, they knew how to run it. And he got fired later.
Huh.
And then Pa, he had 6 of us kids. Monday was born, and he quit the mills one day. But they had so then they had boarders. We had above a store hold empty. There's no rooms in there, but it was all empty. There's beds there.
Oh, wow.
And there's double beds. You rented the double bed out to 4 guys. Because they worked at 12-hour shifts. Then these guys would come from work, and the bed would be warm from these guys.
Going
And you know
back.
how that happened? These men would come from Europe and from other countries to get work, so they didn't have their wives with them. That's why they were, they were considered boarders. They just stayed some places the people fed them too.
Yeah.
So they had like room and board. But eventually they would bring their, families over here, so they would have their families. But there were a lot of single men here without their wives, and a lot of them married here with wives still in Europe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
So Pa tells, he was a head man like among the Croatians. And then the jealous people And I remember telling, time you teach them how to put a bolt on a nut, they think they're
Oh, the manager.
They should be the boss, trying to cut your throat, and Pa just quit. Then he bought a Model T Ford. He went to, right here around Crown Point. And I still remember that black cow, they put a cover her eyes, so she was wild in those trucks weren't, very sturdy in them days. And the calf. Then he made $10 on the cow and $5 on the calf. So that was a good deal. Heck, you'd have to work a couple, 3 weeks for that.
Wow.
So then he started.
My dad rode a bike all the time. And even when he had the restaurant, he rode the bike. And then after they got the grocery store and he was able to afford to buy the truck, then we got around in the truck.
What kind of camera is that?